Okay, time for yin yoga. We'll start a little differently today. We're going to start lying down on our stomach. So like a prone shavasana, but I'll show you what you can do with the upper body. So coming to hands and knees first, come on down onto your stomach. You won't need any props for this one, unless there's something you need personally, then obviously grab that. And then bring the hands in front of you. So you're stacking one hand on top of the other. You just want a little bit of height here so that when you bring the forehead down to rest on the hands, the nose isn't touching the mat or the ground underneath you. It's lifted, it can breathe freely. If for some reason that's not high enough, another thing you can do is make fists and stack one on top of the other. That's much higher. So start with the hands flat, see if that works. And if it does, great, stay there. If it doesn't, make some modifications and come into it that way. So with the eyes closed, we'll start to come into the breath. Take a deeper breath in through the nose, out through the nose. Deep breath in through the nose and slowly back out through the nose. One more like that together. Deep breath in, feeling the movement in the back as you inhale. And slow as you can, exhale. Keep going on your own. So you can be totally relaxed here. Legs are relaxed. The outer ankles can roll out, which might mean that the big toes start to point in toward the center of the mat. That's fine. Hips are heavy. Chest is heavy. Belly soft. So lying on your stomach this way is a really slight back bend. It's a gentle one. And if you can touch that forehead down on something, the hands, or if you're using something else, then we start to kick in that cooling response, which is what we're looking for. And this shape that we're in is also a suitable replacement for child's pose. So if you ever have something going on in your body and child's pose doesn't work, maybe it's the knees, shoulders, whatever it is, this is an alternative to child's pose. You'll start to lift the head up, bring the arms into a cactus shape. We're staying on our stomach. So you want the elbows to be in line with the shoulders. Just take a peek, make sure that's happening. Fingertips are pointing straight forward. So hands are in line with the elbows. And then turn the head to the right, rest the head down on the mat. Bring the feet closer together, especially if they got a little wide. Left hand comes into the mat. So I have mine underneath the shoulder. That's what's most comfortable for me. You just want to place it somewhere where you can press into that left hand. And now you'll start to roll back onto this right shoulder. So the hips will start to peel away from the mat. We'll all be in a different place with this shoulder opening. So don't feel like you have to go too far in. In fact, keep it easy to start. It'll definitely build over time. So if your hips are away from the mat, so that the hips are stacked. That means the feet are probably stacked. And you can play with where the feet go. So if it feels comfortable to keep the feet stacked, keep them stacked. Sometimes it makes a difference if you bring that top foot back or forward. So see if one's more supportive than the other, treating it like a kickstand. So you can just stay right where you want to be without too much effort, as little effort as possible. And once you get yourself set up, see how you can make the pose a little easier. Close the eyes. Feeling that opening on the right side chest, right shoulder area. Staying way away from your edge, not as deep as you can go in the pose. Doing your best to stay with your breath in and out through the nose, feeling the breath move up and down the back of the throat. And we have last few breaths here. If you feel like you're right where you need to be, stay there. If you want to go a little deeper, you can. If you need to back out, chest comes closer to the mat, hips come closer to the mat. You'll start to roll back onto your stomach, coming back into that shape that we were in before. So elbows wide, in line with the shoulders, hands pointing straight forward. Turn the head to the right, rest the left side of the head down on the mat. Feet come closer together. Right hand comes to the mat, probably under the shoulder or next to the rib cage, wherever feels comfortable. And then you'll start to roll back onto the left shoulder, maybe stacking the feet, maybe moving the feet around. Take your time as you come into this. This side might be totally different than the first side. It often is. So you may be in a different place with this. So don't feel like the feet have to be in the same place or that the hips have to be lifted at the same height. Try to find a similar sensation in the left side chest and shoulder as you did on the right, which could look totally different. Once you find that place, see if you can start to come into stillness. Close the eyes if that helps eliminate distraction. If the eyes are open, see if you can keep them focused on one spot and listen to the sound of your breath. You'll start to roll back onto your stomach. Once you get there, let's come back into the shape that we started with. So stacking the hands, but let's stack the hands the other way if you can remember which hand was on top. Let the forehead come back down onto the hands. Legs completely relax. Ankles can roll out. Still staying in a slight opening of the upper body. And you just opened up both sides of the chest, the shoulders. So maybe this feels different than the first time you were in it. Maybe gentler. You'll start to lift the head up. Bring the hands next to the rib cage, come up to hands and knees. So we'll come into melting heart pose. If you're on a hard surface like me, take the time to take the back of the mat, fold it in just about a third of the way. It'll give you extra padding for the knees, which will just feel good more than anything else. If you have plenty of padding underneath the knees, stay where you are. So stack the hips right over the knees. Bring the forearms down to the mat. Walk the elbows ahead of the shoulders a little bit. Bring the forehead down to the mat. So if for whatever reason this shape doesn't work for you, you can come forward to Sphinx pose, which is very similar. Tops of the feet down, elbows underneath the shoulders, back of the neck stays long, and you look down the bridge of the nose. Tailbone points back. If you're in melting heart pose, this will build over time like all of the other poses, which is why you don't go all the way in. We'll also play with a modification a little bit later in the hold. And that'll be optional. So thighs are vertical, even though the hips want to go forward. In melting heart pose, we stay with that shoulder opening, but we're adding in a back bend at the same time. And you may find more comfort in melting heart pose with the shoulders because we did the shoulder opening before this. So you might find yourself deeper into the shape than you typically would. If you'd like, in melting heart pose, to take it deeper, you could bring the palms of the hands together like prayer and bring the hands back behind the head. So fingertips are pointing toward the hips. If that's going well, elbows can crawl forward a little bit. Keep the shoulder blades wide across the back. Shoulders moving toward the hips, away from the ears, so your neck has plenty of space. Forehead's down on the mat, resting. Belly still hugging in a little bit to protect the lower back. If you have the hands behind the head, bring the hands back down to the mat, lift the head up, and you're walking the elbows back in underneath the shoulders. We'll all come back up to hands and knees, no matter where you are. And if you have the back of the mat folded in, unroll it, and you'll come to seated on the mat. So legs out in front of you. Have a block or a bolster nearby. You'll come on down onto your back and you'll scoot the hips over to the right, bring the knees over to the left. So you're coming into a reclined spinal twist. You could put something between the knees. It could be a block, bolster, blanket, whatever you have nearby. That always brings a little bit extra space to the lower back and can feel really nice in a extended hold like we're in now. So head can roll over to the right if the neck's okay with it. Left hand rests on the body somewhere. Maybe you close the eyes. Find your breath. And let the pose do the rest. You're in it. And as you find yourself just resting in the twist, not only are you getting that rotation in the spine, but you're also getting that rotation in the internal organs. So some of your organs are moving, helps with digestion. Twists are great, especially a soft one like this. If you just line it for a few minutes on each side, something gentle, it can move things along if you're ever feeling stuck. You'll start to bring the head back to center. Make your way onto your back again. If you have something between the knees, set it off to the side, or maybe you bring it over to the right side so it's there for you. And then bring the knees so they're right over the hips. Hang on to the knees and start to move the knees around in a circle. And you can feel how maybe one side of the body feels different than the other side after being in that twist. Knees and feet stay together. Go the other way with your circles. Set the feet back down onto the mat. Scoot the hips over to the left this time. Knees come over to the right. Maybe something between the knees. Left arm reaches back behind you and you're back in your reclined twist. So we scoot the hips the opposite direction to get the stacking of the hips. So it doesn't feel like one hip's behind the other, but more like one's on top of the other. And we did a lot of shoulder openings, so it might feel good to stretch that left arm back behind you, hand in line with the shoulder. But there are alternatives if you need them. You could bend at the elbow, which is a deeper shoulder opening. You could reach the arm overhead, which some people just find more comfort. And the arm can go down by the side if your shoulder needs a break. And if the neck's okay with it, you can let the nose fall in the direction of that left arm, eyes open or closed. If open, keeping the eyes fixed on one spot. Last few breaths in your reclined twist. Try to keep them long and even. You'll start to bring the head back to center if it's rolled over to the left. If you have something between the knees, set it off to the side. Find your way onto your back again, coming to center, and then bring the knees in just right over the hip. Same counter pose we did before, knees and feet together. Start with those circles, maybe going in the opposite direction first, whatever feels like the opposite way in your body. And switch the direction of the circles. Bring the feet down to the mat, roll over to your right side, use the hands to bring yourself up. So we'll transition to child's pose. It might be nice to use a bolster underneath you or stacked blankets, whatever you have. I'll use a bolster. You'll bring it in front of you the long way. Come back to hands and knees. And once you come to hands and knees, the bolster or whatever prop, you can do this without a prop. So if you don't have any props, skip it. But if you do, slide whatever you have just between the knees. So not the thighs, just between the knees. So you have plenty of runway to lie down on this prop in front of you. Bring the forearms down to the mat, big toes together, hips sit back as far as the knees will allow. If your hips are high, that's fine. And then turn the head to the left, resting the right side of the head down on the prop, whatever you're using. Coming into your child's pose with the chest elevated, potentially, if you have a prop underneath you. So shoulders and upper body are feeling more open. Starting to get into the lower body. We haven't done any hip opening yet. Depending on where the hips are in space, you may be feeling a hip opening here. Don't worry if the hips are high because of the knees. We have plenty of time to get into the hips. And if you have the head turned in one direction, lift it, turn it the other way, see if the neck's okay with this. If it's not, you can go back in the same direction you were in before. When the neck allows for it, it's nice to stay even on each side when we turn the head. So I do my best to offer that option so you don't have to pay attention to the time. You'll start to lift the head back up, coming back to hands and knees. And you won't need the bolster for the next pose. You can set that off to the side. If you have a block or two, that'd be great. Find yourself in seated again, feet over to one side, soles of the feet to the mat. If you have blocks, I'll show you how to use them. If you don't, you can skip it altogether. Don't worry about it. If you have blocks, you'll take them, let's do this side. You'll take them the lowest height, the wide way on your mat, just toward the top of the mat. So lowest height, wide way, all the way together. Bring them to the top of the mat. Actually, let's turn it this way. So it's a big square. So the long way forward. So one big square, lowest height. Bring the feet on top of the blocks. You'll need to scoot the hips in. So you want a deep bend in the knees so that when you lie down on your back, you still have a bend in the knees. And you might need to adjust if you feel like you're too far away, then scoot yourself forward, but you are looking for a bent leg. If you're not using blocks, feet are just down on the mat. So from here, cross the right ankle on top of the left thigh, just like thread the needle. So that outer right knee is moving away from you. That right foot is gently flexed. Arms can be down by the sides, palms facing up. You could also bring the hands on the body, left hand on the heart, right hand on the belly, or two hands in one place. Sometimes feels good. So we elevated that left foot to make the pose a little bit deeper if you have something underneath the foot. If for whatever reason it's not working to have a block underneath you, then move the block out of the way and just bring the left foot down to the mat. But we're avoiding bringing the legs all the way in and hanging on to that back of the left thigh. This is a gentle hip opening. We'll get deeper and deeper as we move through more poses. So take it easy on this one. Plus it's yin yoga, so we're not supposed to be going all the way in to any shape, only part of the way. And then seeing where we end up at the end of the hold. If you have the hands on the body, it's a nice way to get some feedback from your breath, making sure you're not allowing the body to go back to breathing on its own, but keeping those long inhales and exhales. The inhales, you'll feel the body press up against the hands. And on the exhale, you'll feel the body start to move away from the hands. One more inhale in through the nose and exhale back out through the nose. Right foot comes down to a block if you're using two. If you're only using one, that's fine. You can just scoot that one block over. And you'll switch sides, left ankle, right thigh. Start to press that left knee away from you. Figuring out where you'd like the hands, maybe on the body, maybe down by the sides. Maybe you're keeping them right where they were for the first side. That's fine too. Outer left knees gently pressing away from you. Left foot's flexed. Take one more breath in through the nose. Slowly back out through the nose. Left foot comes back down. If you have blocks underneath the feet, just scoot the blocks over to the side of the mat so they're off of the mat. Bring the feet wide to the outer edges of the mat. Knees come together in the center of the mat. And now you'll just bring, bring the arms out wide, but bend at the elbows. So fingertips are pointing back behind you. If it's too much, you can always just come and do a T shape with the arms and extend them all the way out. Bring the knees side to side like windshield wipers. Keeping the feet wide is important so you get into the hips, releasing them. We'll stay in the hips for the next couple of poses. You'll start to find a familiar shape. We're externally rotating the hip with these hip openings. So you'll come back to center, roll over to one side, use the left hand to bring yourself up to seated. And I'll turn to face you. You're welcome to stay where you are unless you want the feet on the mat. You'll take a wide-legged straddle, not as wide as you can go. Feel free to prop yourself up on a block or a blanket with the hips. So take the right foot, just bring it in so that the foot's in the center of the body, toes pointing forward. You're coming into half butterfly. So blocks could be really nice for the hands if you have them available. Start to fold forward, straight forward. So resting the hands or maybe the forearms on the blocks or building something for the forehead to rest on. But again, be gentle with yourself. So you're getting that hip opening on the left side with the knee outside of the torso. We're also starting to get into the right hip, but also the right leg by keeping it extended. And the farther forward you fold down over the legs, the more intense this is. So make sure you're not all the way in. And if you feel like the body is starting to open in a way that you want to go down lower and it still will feel easy, you can always adjust to do that, especially if you're using props. Props sometimes keep you in the same exact place that you were in. So moving them around a little bit to see where you could maybe go deeper, but still not all the way in. You'll start to walk the hands in, bring yourself back up to seated. Grab onto the back of the left thigh, extend that left leg out in front of you, bring the hands back behind you, lean back. You'll bring the soles of the feet down to the ground, and then you'll move the knees side to side. Quick rebound before we transition. We'll do the same pose, just other leg, other hip. So you'll come back to your wide-legged straddle, wide-legged seat, not as wide as you can go. This time, grab onto the back of the left thigh, bring that left foot in. So you have this shape with the legs. left toes pointing straight forward, and you'll start to fold forward. So you might be in a different place. Use the hands to figure out where you need to be. Blocks are great. As you start to fold forward, maybe closing the eyes, letting the head and the neck go, figuring out where the blocks can fill in any spaces between the body and the ground if you're using them. You can definitely do this without blocks. You found that you've lost your breath, try to come back to it. It'll make the hip opening that much better. Last couple breaths here. Make them long. Start to bring yourself back up to seated and extend that left leg out to the side. Bring the hands back behind you. Feet come to the mat, knees side to side. So this next pose will be our final hip opening, also our deepest. Same shape with the legs. You're still getting that external hip rotation happening, and we'll just see where it goes. So you'll come back to seated. I'm going to face forward, be completely on the mat. And you're coming into a cross-legged seat. So square pose. Let's bring the right shin in front just so we're all doing the same side. If your knees are up high, that's when you want to put something underneath the hips. So a blanket's always nice for that. A bolster could even be a block. Maybe lift the hips up with a tiny bit and set them back down so that you get that nice spinal alignment. And when you look at the legs, we're trying to cross at mid shin. That doesn't happen for everyone. Just see if it does for you. And you don't want the feet back. You want the feet forward. So that left ankle is ideally underneath the right knee. If you have the hips down on the ground and everything's going well, you could take this right foot, bring it up on top of the left knee. And that's the deepest variation. You keep the feet flexed and it's fire log, right? So you're stacking the ankles and the knees one on top of the other. And if there's a big gap, you can always fill it with a blanket or a bolster or a block. All right, so you can stay like this. Chest lifted, hands back behind you. If there's room to come forward in your square pose. And if you do have this right foot stacked and it becomes too intense, you just take the foot, move it down to the mat. You're still in the shape, you stay there. If it feels okay to have the foot stacked, keep it stacked. And the farther forward you fold down, the deeper you get into the pose. So back off, find a place where there's still more space. Come to your breath. And just be here. As you're breathing, visualizing where the breath is going, what area of the body needs it the most? How is that helping the shape? Are you feeling a release beginning? One more inhale in through the nose, back out through the nose. Start to lift the head if you folded forward, coming back to seated. If you have props in front of you, set those off to the side. If this right foot's stacked, bring it forward so it's down on the mat. Hands back behind you, lean back, feet wide, knees side to side, windshield wipers. Definitely want to do this after that pose. So it's great to come into square when you need a hip opening, but if you're going to stack that foot, you definitely want some poses to go ahead of it. That's a very deep hip opening if you're playing with it today. So you'll come back to center, this time left shin in front of right. So we're getting into another hip. It could look totally different on this side, shift side to side. If you're still up on the props underneath you, great. We'll all lift the hips up a tiny bit, set them back down. So that way you get that alignment in the spine. Maybe you will definitely cross mid shin or as close to it as you can. Toes point forward, feet away from you in line with the knees. Maybe left foot comes on top of right knee. And maybe it worked on one side, but not the other. You'll definitely notice if one side's tighter than the other. If there's a big gap, you can fill it in with the block, blanket, bolster, whatever you have. Hands come back behind you, sit up as tall as you can, and then maybe you stay there. Maybe you start to fold forward, coming back into this shape on this side. Don't feel like you need to be in the same exact place you were in before. It's probably different. Once you find that place to start, close the eyes if that is something that's comforting for you. Listen to the sound of your breath. Try to put in 5 to 8 good quality breaths. Once you find yourself in just after 5 to 8 breaths, observe what's changed. Is there more ease in the hip opening? Keep that breath going. The hips need it. But maybe you're feeling less resistance. That's few breaths where you are. And start to bring the head back up, chest back up. Set anything in front of you off to the side. If the left foot is stacked, bring that left foot forward, back down to the mat. Hands come back behind you. Separate the feet wide, knees side to side. So you can see how that pose can get deep. Your hips probably feel very different than when you first landed on your mat. We spent some time there. And now it's time for Shavasana. So we'll come into our final relaxation pose. If you have blocks, use them. If you have a bolster, you could use that too. But you'll take the blocks this time the wide way, lowest height, just straight out at the top of the mat, one right next to the other. So it's like they're connected. And you'll bring the heels on top of the bolster, blocks, whatever you have there. Keep a bend in the knees as you lie down onto your back. Once you lie down onto your back, you want the legs to be straight, feet elevated. And this will feel good after having the legs bent for so long. Now you'll have the feet elevated. You can let the toes turn out, which is why we're doing 2 blocks or something wide underneath the feet. If you don't have any props, just do your traditional Shavasana. Legs will still be straight, toes will turn out. Close the eyes, arms down by the sides, palms facing up, letting the fingers curl. And even here, you always have the option in Shavasana to bring the hands on the body if that feels like a better place to be. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes. Stretch the arms overhead, stretching out through the legs too at the same time. Start to walk the feet in, bending the knees, soles of the feet to the mat. Roll over onto your right side, cradle the head on the arm, keep the eyes closed, lying on your side for a moment, starting to collect yourself to come back into your day after this practice. Left hand comes down to press yourself up. And you'll come to a meditation seat, whatever that looks like for you, with or without props. Sitting up tall with the eyes closed. You can find that height in the spine. Even though this was a slower practice, it's such a deep one. So you can find that space that you made. Hips are open. You can find the space in the spine rising up through the crown of the head, keeping the shoulders in place now that they're open. Bring the hands together in front of you, keeping the lift of the chest. Start to bow the head. Take a moment, honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Good work today. Hope those hip openings felt good. And it was a full body practice. We just ended with hips. Sometimes we start with hips, but we stay in one area of the body for 15, 20 minutes before we start to move on to other areas. So hope you feel great and have a good rest of your day or evening.